This is Michelle Hughes from Ageless and Timeless. Today's podcast is brought to you by Water and Wellness. Recently, I had the opportunity to visit Water and Wellness at their offices, and I can tell you that as far as you and I are concerned and our health is concerned, this is one of the most important places that you can go to find water that is purified and products that will help your longevity and your overall health. Visit waterandwellness.com to learn how you can take control of your drinking water and learn about those natural additives to optimize your health and longevity. Contact Stacy at 877-296-6880. Use the Ageless code and you'll get a 20% discount on all your products.
My love for you is immeasurable. My respect for you immense. You're ageless, timeless, lace and fineness, your beauty.
Good morning. This is Michelle Hughes from Ageless and Timeless, and I'm coming to you today from St. Helena, California. I've been doing quite a bit of traveling lately. Unlike most people who've been locked down, I've been very careful, but St. Helena is the middle of the Napa wine country, and it's very interesting to be here at this time when most of the restaurants are being closed down and the wineries are closed down. However, there's still opportunities to be healthy in the hiking and biking and all the other outdoor activities. So segueing to health and wellness, which, as you know, is one of our big themes in Ageless and Timeless, I've invited a guest to join us today. His name is Steve Sakala, and he's the founder and chief executive of a company called Botanicals out of Hawaii. And those of you who know my background from prior guests, I've spent 25 years of my life in and out of Hawaii developing real estate. So Hawaii is as they say, my heart is in San Francisco and my soul is in Hawaii. So I'm happy to have you. Welcome, Steve, to
Thanks.
Ageless and Timeless.
Thanks so much, Michelle. Good to be with you.
I know it. What are we, 3 hours?
We are. It's just coming up on 8 a.m. here.
8 a.m. here. Okay, there. Okay, well, thank you for getting up and taking, being so fresh and eager at this hour of your morning. And we want to actually explore so many subjects with you, Steve, but why don't we start by telling us a bit about you, who you are, where you started, how you journeyed to become this pioneer and visionary in Hawaii. So start us from the beginning and give us a little bit of your history.
Great. Well, thank you. I'm fortunate enough to be here on the Big Island of Hawaii. I have a farm in South Kona. The farm is Honau Now Farm, and it's my dream. I'm getting to really live my dream, so I feel really fortunate. I've been here now 15 years, really developing this idea of regenerative agriculture, which has become my passion over the last 2 or 3 decades. The pleasure of being on a diversified farm is really getting to play with so many different crops and ideas, sustainable models. And really that stems back from my experience in college and community college, where I was really inspired to look at how do we start looking at the solutions to many of our Earth's challenges and our society's challenges. And that's really where I started my activism in working towards solutionary models for environmental challenges. So I'm originally from California. I got my degree in Humboldt, excellent education in activism, natural resources, sciences, and really became an early advocate of cannabis in California right out of high school. I got to work with one of the legends in the industry, Jack Herrera, and we worked hard in California to publicize hemp and medical cannabis in the early 90s. And since then, I've been involved in cannabis and farming.
You were way before your time. It took a while for the the medical cannabis to become mainstream. And so what role do you feel that you and Jack played in that development
Well,
and
certainly
progress.
Jack was one of the main instigators, along with Dennis Perrone there in San Francisco. They were the forefathers of the current movement. And, I was just lucky enough to be in the right place at the right time to be able to meet those guys and support them through just being out on the streets collecting signatures. But it's been a slow road. This plant's been a part of our reality for thousands of years, either through our diet or as a medicinal. And to have it removed in the early 1900s and then prohibition in the 30s was really a disservice to really prohibit us from this really powerful plant medicine and a nutritional. So it was a real pleasure to be back a part of that movement, re-educating. And at Botanics with our CBD hemp line, that's what we spend a lot of time doing, is still educating. Although the time has finally caught up where people are re-looking at the potential of this plant in a really diverse way. So it was fun to be on that journey. Of course, we wish it would have happened much quicker, and really we wish it wouldn't have had to been a recouping of information from prohibition, but certainly we're happy to be on the front end now.
Well, let's explore this couple of very important subjects you're touching on. One is hemp versus THC, which is obviously cannabis, and the pros and cons of each. And then secondly, I want to explore regenerative agriculture, because that is such a huge topic today. And so let's start with the hemp versus THC. What is the advantage of using cannabis over using hemp if you do not want to get high?
Right. Well, so let me clarify the terms, because oftentimes in the industry and in the media, it's not really defined properly. So for your listeners, high THC cannabis comes from the exact same plant that the hemp cannabis comes from. They're all in the cannabis family. So when we say hemp, what we're referring to is a cannabis plant that has less than 1%, well, actually less than 0.3% THC.
Right.
So 0.3%, that's less than half of 1% THC is what in America, in the United States, they define as hemp.
Right.
So anything above 0.3% is considered a high THC plant by definition. Really, even up to 2, 3, 4% THC, it's likely, unless you're very sensitive, that you wouldn't get high off that amount of THC. But for legal purposes, anything over that 0.3% is a high THC plant.
And we should clarify that was the ruling that came a couple of years ago with the Farm Bill passing, and that was a historic event in the United States. If you want to touch on that just for a moment, so people understand where that 0.3% came from.
Yeah, the 0.3% actually comes from a more historical time when I believe it was in the 70s, when they actually kind of the war on drugs, and they really set the limit. So it comes from previous times, and it got rolled over into this bill that you're referring to, which it was the Farm Bill in 2018. Part of that Farm Bill allowed for hemp to be grown under pilot projects. And so we are really fortunate under that 2018 Farm Bill to now have a re-emerging hemp industry here in the States.
So go ahead and explain a little more about the value of using one versus the other.
Yeah. So, I'm lucky to have, 2 decades of experience in both now. And I definitely, get to experience the benefits of both, working with friends and family and being in the industry. Really, the beauty of hemp and CBD is you can think of it as a beauty product, a nutritional, and a medicinal. Hemp can be used for so many different things, the CBD and the cannabinoids. Just to clarify, CBD stands for cannabidiol. It's a non-psychoactive cannabinoid, so you can take large amounts of it without getting any psychoactive effect. So that can be, the main categories we see people using that for is anxiety, anti-inflammatory benefits, sleep, pain, and those are really what we would, I guess, consider the large buckets that people are using that for. But the list goes on and on. We see it benefiting people that have insulin challenges or diabetes. It can help balance out blood pressure and cholesterol levels, hormone production. So the list is incredible because of our endocannabinoid system and how the CBD works with that, what the health benefits can be. On the THC side, you have obviously, you know, the emerging science showing that THC is good for pain relief, you know, especially with this challenge of the opioid epidemic. Many people are choosing to go with cannabis for pain relief over the opioids or a pharmaceutical. So that's a huge benefit to taking a higher THC product or using higher THC herb. We have, you know, some early indicators in science about cancer fighting abilities of both THC and CBD, but THC is certainly has that potential. We also have documented uses around HIV symptoms, AIDS and the wasting syndrome, nausea, things like that is really where you would see the THC more applicable. And certainly on the recreational side, stress relief and sleep are both really high THC benefits.
So when you're talking with people and they ask you, you know, well, I want to have all those benefits. I just don't want to be in a state that isn't, what's the word, non-psychoactive.
Yeah.
Is that the right word?
Yeah. When you're talking to someone that really wants the benefits of cannabis, but wants to avoid the high or the psychoactive part, you're really looking at a hemp CBD hemp-based product,
right?
Or a low THC. You know, many of the dispensaries now, especially there in California and the West Coast, but really it's spreading throughout the country. They offer CBD ratios to THC where the THC is quite low. You know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5%. Any of those products are likely to add a health benefit without the high. So you just really have to do some research and look at what is the THC to CBD ratio that works best for you and your desired results. A little THC, even in the CBD products, is going to give what we call an entourage effect, which science shows is the more medicinal way to use cannabis. I would advise people in my studies and what I've spoken with some of the professionals in the medical industry and cannabis to avoid anything that's pure CBD or 100% or 99% CBD, because what those are going to be, those are isolates or isolated compounds. And most of those are chemical processes that eliminate some of the other cannabinoids and the THC. I don't consider those as healthy in the long term as a full spectrum product.
Right. So I was just about to ask you the broad spectrum versus full spectrum. Would you explain that for all of us? Because there's so much confusion about CBD and how to select, and there's so many products on the retail market that I think we need to try to differentiate for the viewers today, which is the product that they should buy for their particular interests, and why not some of the others that could just be a waste of money. So could you give us a little dissertation on the efficacy of CBD in terms of the broad and full spectrum? And you've already touched on the isolates and why not to buy product that is made from isolate, right?
Right. So the difference between full spectrum and broad spectrum is really just the removal of THC on the broad spectrum side. So full spectrum would be something that's an oil that derives all of the cannabinoids out of the cannabis plant that are present, and maybe even some terpenes. And that's what we're going to define as full spectrum, meaning it has high CBD or high CBG, the minor cannabinoids, as well as some terpenes. And that's where you're going to get the maximum health benefit according to most science studies. The terpenes play an absolute role in that synergizing action with the cannabinoids. And that's the real benefit of going with a full spectrum product. The broad spectrum product is just one step down from a full spectrum, because really it still has some of the minor cannabinoids, likely still real high in CBD or CBG, but has the THC removed. And that's because some in the industry just don't want to deal with that 0.3% THC for whatever reason, either job-related challenges, worried about failing a drug test, just perception. And we have some limitations in some countries like Japan where they want it to be non-detectable or 0% THC. So that's where you get the broad spectrum. It still has multiple cannabinoids in it, but not THC or non-detectable THC. And that's versus the isolate, which is only one compound. So those are the three tiers: full spectrum, all of the cannabinoids that are present in the plant; broad spectrum, all the cannabinoids present in the plant with THC removed; and isolate with just one compound.
So Steve, what is the THC when it is included? What is it about the THC that aids and abets the effectiveness of the CBD or the hemp side?
Yeah. So I'm not a doctor and I can't claim to be a medical professional. So my knowledge is really just in the deep study of this plant and the science that's out. But essentially, a little THC is shown to help prime and highlight the receptors in the endocannabinoid system better than when THC is absent. So when you have a little THC, your endocannabinoid system recognizes this whole plant medicine in a way that gives you a higher potential of benefiting from the cannabis plant than if the THC is completely removed.
Okay, so that makes sense. So it's a catalyst. It's a catalyst.
Absolutely. Your body recognizes the whole plant medicine differently when it's present.
And I guess the reason that a lot of the folks that not only the drug testing, but the 0.3% is, it has to be measured, and you have to go through a whole process with government regulations so that, you know, any farmers who have produced products that are over the 0.3 and that gets caught, that can be the, you know, basically the demise of that particular plant and product line, right? So there's another reason, maybe other than like the Japanese who won't allow any THC. There's another reason, which is that sometimes the measurement can be in excess of what you have intended, and that now your whole crop is illegal. Correct?
Yeah. I mean, on the plant side, there's no way to remove entirely the THC. So that's why hemp farmers are in a precarious situation.
Yeah.
With this 0.3%. There's a real movement in the hemp industry to get that raised to 1%. 1% THC is still non-psychoactive. It's a much more realistic marker of what a hemp farmer could keep their THC levels under. So in the plant, it's almost impossible to have that less than 0.3%. You know, maybe through genetic modification or gene marking that we'll see some technology evolve in the next years. But right currently, you really have to mitigate that on the product side. So that's where, you know, or the extraction side. So that's where there's a lot of technology evolving and how to remove that THC out of the plant when it's in extraction. And then how do you mitigate that when you're creating a product? And yes, everything has to be tested. And if you're making your products properly and you're using your extracts properly, you should be able to always stay under that 0.3% mark. It's in the plant that makes it really difficult at the growing stage to keep it under that.
So what are the biggest challenges that you face being vertically integrated? And you've just touched on one of them, which is keeping it below the THC below the legal level of 0.3. But what are some of the other challenges that you face? Because you are truly from the farm to the consumer.
Yeah.
A very, you know, that's a process that requires a lot of attention to detail. So why don't you tell us what your challenges are in that process?
Yeah, you know, the learning curve has been a real interesting opportunity and at moments a challenge. I come from a farming background and a science background. And so stepping into a vertically integrated business and where I became a manufacturer and a brander and a marketer with this, you know, endeavor was really a challenge in the beginning to get out of the mindset. It took me away from the farm, which is a challenge for me personally, because I really love being on the farm in connection to the plants and connection to the food I'm growing. So to step out of that and into the office with a majority of my time was a personal challenge, certainly. I think one of the other main challenges is we're up against 70 years of prohibition and really propaganda from our government, which was an incredible challenge to overcome initially. I think we're getting past that as we see, 35 states, either legal, medical, or recreational, and a more truthful depiction of this plant and its potential. But initially, when I've been working with CBD for over 10 years now, initially there was a stigma that was an incredible challenge, that you had to explain that this isn't THC, you're not going to get high. We've had cannabis a part of our diet or as our medicinal cupboard, our apothecary, for thousands of years, and do a lot of re-education. That takes time. When you're educating, you're not selling, you're educating. And so that took extra time. It was definitely one of my passions, but a challenge to be able to create the opportunities and the time to spend educating people as part of the business.
So what would you say is the best form to take to get the most bang for your buck? Let's say, what's the best form of taking, let's just focus on hemp right now, on CBD right now.
Yeah.
So, what do you recommend is the most absorbable, the most efficacious for people to get the best results?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think what I recommend to folks is really, you want to look at how do you use CBD is really dependent on what results you're looking for. In general, the best way to get the maximum results of the CBD hemp plant is to take it orally by mouth. And the reason is when you take it by mouth orally, you're going to hit a majority of the receptors in the organ system. It'll go through, you can do sublingual, which will pass the blood-brain barrier a little bit quicker. You can swallow some of it, which will then go through the GI system. And then you really get the maximum benefit to optimally hit as many endocannabinoid receptors as possible. There are some exceptions to that. Let's say if you have a lung issue, you might want to vaporize some CBD to really get it directly to the lungs. If you've got pain and inflammation at the joint level, you might want to supplement that oral dose with some topical. But in general, the maximum efficacy comes from an oral dose.
So, but sublingual, so it goes right into the bloodstream rather than through the GI tract.
I would say you want some to go through both because a lot of people have stomach challenges. A lot of people have GI challenges. So to have some of that absorbed sublingually is going to really benefit you, and to have some of it go through your organ system and GI system is also going to benefit you. So I usually say, let it sit under your tongue for 30 seconds to a minute. Whatever is absorbed then is perfect for that sublingual application. Whatever still remains, you can swallow, and then you get that benefit to go through that GI system.
So when you say swallow, you're saying swallow the actual tincture that you've just taken sublingual, that obviously eventually it's going to stay under your tongue for 30 to a minute.
Correct.
But you're going to swallow it, so then it does have its travel through the GI tract.
You got it.
However, you've already had some absorptions in the mouth, which is one of the first receptors.
Correct.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Okay, so what dosage? What's the intensity of the dosage that you recommend?
Yeah, well, again, not a medical professional, but with my 20 years of experience in cannabis, there's a couple of rules that we recommend. If you're new to cannabis, we absolutely recommend to start low and go slow. So we call it the low and slow kind of method, which is start with low milligrams, maybe even 5 to 10 milligrams, which usually should be imperceptible for most people. And then, we see most of our clients taking somewhere on an average between 20 to 30 milligrams a couple times a day. And that seems to be the sweet spot for many people for the general benefits of anxiety relief, inflammation, some better sleep results, and certainly pain. So those are what we see in the industry as those typical ranges, but it can really vary depending on what your target is in the body and the results that you're looking for. So that just depends, but those are the generalities I would recommend.
And then what are some of the pitfalls that you would guide people to avoid in terms of their selection of product?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, because I'm on the regenerative agriculture side of things, and I've been an organic farmer for my entire farming history, it's one of the main things I recommend people look for, because if you're using a CBD product for a health challenge, you don't want to compromise your immune system further by getting something that might have you know, chemical fertilizer residuals or molds or pesticides or herbicide molecules. So looking for something that's organically grown, and not just the hemp. Make sure that all the ingredients are organic. You know, we talk about organic hemp a lot in the industry, but then we put it into a carrier oil that has no history of being organic or not certified organic. So
Nice.
if you're working with or in a compromised immune system of any sort, or if you're using this for a health and wellness regime, you absolutely want to make sure that you're using organic ingredients in that CBD product. One of the things that we do to really increase absorption and efficacy at the Botanics brand is we add additional botanicals. And that really can also help with some of the things that we're talking about. So our main additional botanical is turmeric, which is one of the most widely studied plant medicines on the planet, with over 4,000 years of documented use. So we combine that CBD full spectrum extract that's organically grown with some of these other really potent synergistic herbs and botanicals.
So we want to get to Botanics in a moment, but I do want people to know that we're not here just to advertise, and we are being objective, and that you have studied this industry. So if you were going to put together a resource list of other companies besides yours that you believe are doing the right thing by the consumer and adding the organic products, the carrier and the catalyst that you mentioned, what are some of the companies that are reputable in that respect?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would love to have a long list, but I don't have a long list because, to be honest, there's not a lot of companies using lots of, you know, a predominantly organic approach. But one company that really stands out is RE Botanicals, started by John Rulak, who's the founder of Nativa, and Palmetto Harmony with the founder Janelle. Those are two companies that I believe are focused on organic ingredients, regenerative agriculture, and really doing right by the industry to set the model. They really are taking the right steps.
Steve, I'm sorry to interrupt. What was the second company? I missed that.
It's called Palmetto Harmony.
Palmetto, like the bug, Palmetto?
Yep.
Palmetto Harmony. I've never heard of them. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we have a few favorites too. You know, we've had, we're going to have Clint Boone, who you met, or actually you met his sister.
Too. Yeah.
Yeah, his sister in Hawaii, and that is called Roos, ROOS Botanics, and they are definitely efficacious about every detail of farming. So they are just like you, vertically integrated. And then Quicksilver. What about, have you interacted with Quicksilver Scientific at all? And
you know, I'm familiar with their work, and they do a lot of great products, but I'm not so familiar with their CBD side.
Yeah, Dr. Chris Shade. He's a, you know, like you. He's a scientist and was a farmer, and you know, has that same pure intention, let's say, of creating the best products for the health and wellness of all of us. So Dr. Shade was a guest on our podcast. Actually came on twice because we ran out, but you can definitely tune in and listen to some of what he said. And, you know, one of the things Quicksilver Scientific does, they combine with GABA, L-theanine, you know, for the calming and the stress release. So have you ever considered doing that with some of your products?
You know, we really are focused on this idea of whole plant medicine. And so we have not taken it down to the single molecules like that. It's really our interest to say that we can stand behind each ingredient because we know exactly where it comes from. When you get down to the GABA and some of those things, you're more of in a laboratory environment. So it's just not our brand. We're really the idea of an herbalist approach, the nature knows best, and using whole plant medicines.
Mhm.
It's not that that's not a great approach, it's just not our approach.
Right, I understand. And that actually is good because it differentiates you from uh, some of the others and gives you a niche. And so
Yeah.
let's segue now to the regenerative agriculture. So what, why is it so important to regenerative agriculture to our wellness?
Yeah, that's a great question. Really, I think at this stage of the planet, what we know for a fact is that chemical agriculture is a failed experiment. It's depleted our soils. It's really destroyed our microbiome through the residuals that we get in our food. It certainly has just destroyed our soil web, which is really the foundation of all life. So what we need to do is start pivoting our agriculture models to more sustainable models, and organic agriculture is one baby step in that direction. But in my opinion, and what science is showing us, we have to go beyond just that baby step of organic agriculture and start looking at not just eliminating chemical fertilizers and chemical pesticides and chemical herbicides, but how do we look at the practices that put carbon back into the soil, that leave more in the soil than we take out in our agriculture practices. Because we've stripped the soils for so long, we have to be looking at how to regenerate the soils so that we can start eating nutrient dense food again. And our food has become less nutrient dense due to these agriculture processes, which absolutely is our founding building block of our health and wellness. If we're not getting the nutrition we need from our food, then we're more challenged to stay healthy. And so for me, the regenerative agriculture, this idea of putting more back in than we're taking out in our agriculture practices, is one of the solutions to our to a healthy lifestyle and to the long-term longevity of our race, really.
Well, two things occur to me. One is the recent $10 billion lawsuit that
Monsanto, yes.
Monsanto and Bayer, and the fact that Bayer is not admitting any wrongdoing. However, they're still having to pay 10 billion. So how do you explain that one?
Well, the writing is clear. You don't have to dig very deep anymore to know that Monsanto, and now the parent owner and parent company of Monsanto, Bayer, they were deceptive in what they sold to American farmers and now to the world. And that is poisons that they claimed were non-harmful, and yet we now have the science that shows that they were extremely harmful to humans, as well as extremely damaging to our soils and to the bees, so, and to the insects, and really to the planet as a whole. And now they're being called out. And even though they're not admitting wrongdoing, the fact that jury after jury now is showing them culpable for damage to human health and to farmers and to their businesses, I hope that this puts them under, because we can't continue to have chemical agriculture and have a healthy planet and a healthy human race.
But why is it that people still buy Roundup, for example?
It's fascinating to me. I have a farm store here on the Big Island that I go to get some of my organic inputs, and they have a big pallet of Roundup all the time. And when I'm in there, there's usually someone buying Roundup, and it makes me want to jump out of my skin and say, do you realize what you're doing to yourself and to the planet? You have to look at the history. Most of the people have been convinced that these are safe chemicals through a long string of propaganda. And the word hasn't totally gotten out that these are extremely dangerous chemicals. It really is going to take a concerted effort to really educate and re-educate people on how to take care of the land and themselves without these types of chemicals.
So let's just assume that we weren't using Roundup, because we are evolved, enlightened, and health conscious enough, and we've made that decision, whether whatever we are, small farmer or a large institutional.
Yeah.
What do we do to mitigate the insects and the pests that are the reason that Roundup exists and has? So what's our alternative?
Yeah, I would really direct people to the Rodell Institute and to Acres
Mhm.
USA for a wealth of information on this subject. They're
Mm.
really the crux of the information coming out about these types of practices. But essentially, there's a list of practices that you can do, like diversifying your farm. We have to move away from this idea of monocropping and hundreds of acres, or thousands of acres for that matter, of the same crop. That is
Mm.
not going to be sustainable when you look at pest management and soil carbon levels. So you have to think about diversifying your crops first of all. No-till would be another practice that we would recommend in regenerative agriculture. Start using cover crops during off seasons and rotating the fallow areas in a crop area. Using mob grazing is another thing that we can do to incorporate carbon, to break pest cycles. There's many ways to incorporate livestock and diversifying agriculture crops and fallow periods, incorporating pollinating species into the agriculture crops so that you have flowers that attract pollinators and other predator insects that help keep the pest population under control. So there's a myriad of ways to do this. They're all documented as successful. You have Dr. Zach Bush, triple certified physician, really taking on regenerative agriculture as one of his missions to educate farmers about some of these practices on a large scale, not the small scale farmer, but the medium and large scale farmer about these practices, so that these farmers can look at models that are actually working and it's not theoretical, because those models actually exist and they're out there now.
Do you think it's more costly to do a lot of the suggestions that you just made rather than just spray Roundup and be done with it?
Actually, we're showing the opposite. These studies are showing that you actually save money doing these practices because you're not investing in GMO seeds, you're not investing in chemical agriculture, and your crop yield goes up because you're actually feeding the soil web that actually hosts the microorganisms that convert the nutrients to the plant. So, it's an adjustment, and you might have to change the type of equipment that you use or pull behind your tractor. So there's maybe some initial capital cost in the changeover. But as you get 3, 4, 5, 6 years on, the crop yields are showing to increase. So you're actually making more money over time.
And they're healthier plants.
And they're healthier plants, and you're doing the right thing for the planet. And as a farmer, you're not exposing yourself to these dangerous chemicals. I had, a family member who was a farmer that died from a rare form of brain cancer. And of course, we know that it was related to the farm chemicals that he was using. He was a very young adult. So, these farmers are exposing themselves to chemicals and chemical combinations that are unstudied. And we really need to protect our farmers by educating them about these practices. And of course, the health of our land is paramount.
So just to go back one moment, because you said something about the carbon and regenerating the soil. What is the process of doing that? I mean, obviously carbon is an ingredient, but how do you inject it back into the soil and make the soil healthier and richer as a result?
Yeah, there's different ways to do that. But one of the main ways that we're familiar with as a gardener, as a farmer, is by adding compost onto the land. So by adding carbon, either through compost or by cover crops, you can, plant a whole field of cover crops and then leave the cover crops in your field to deteriorate and feed the soil with that carbon level. And what the carbon does is, think of it as like the home for the microorganisms, or the apartment complex. It provides the substrate for those microorganisms to be able to live. And it's those microorganisms that we're actually after. That's what really, again, helps to feed the micronutrients and the nutrients directly to the plant roots. So it's absolutely essential for a healthy ecosystem to have those microorganisms. The carbon happens to be the home for those. And then also, as we know, carbon in our atmosphere is incredibly destructive. So by putting that carbon back into the soil, you're keeping it out of the atmosphere. So it serves multiple purposes. Carbon doesn't just do one thing in the environment or in the soil. It serves multiple functions. Those are two of the main functions of why we want to add more carbon into our soil structure. It also has a role in helping hold water and creating air spaces. So the aeration and the structure of the soil really also depends on how much carbon we have in the soil.
I'm glad you mentioned water, because I was just about to ask you the importance of water in this whole process. And we know how tainted water is in our environment. So how do you deal with the water issue?
Well, the water issue is a challenge because of these years and years of chemical agriculture. We have polluted aquifers, and it's really going to take us some time to clean up our mess. I think by adding carbon into the soil, you're optimizing whatever rainwater you get at a location. Here on the Big Island, we have a lot of rainwater catchment, so I'm fortunate enough to be living off of rainwater on my farm. So it really depends on where you're at and what your location is, what your solution is to the water challenges. But certainly by adding a lot of carbon into your soil with compost, with using cover crops, with using some of these techniques, you're taking advantage of the water that you do get on your location, the rain that you do get. And that's what we want to do, is we want to lock that water into our location, not have it run off. Any type of soil runoff and loss from water is a real travesty, and we've seen it for too long. A lot of that soil in the Midwest ended up in the Mississippi River and is now in the Gulf of Mexico, and it's caused tremendous amounts of environmental destruction. So by using these techniques, we're also keeping the water on our farms and having it infiltrate into the aquifers.
I always tell people, I wouldn't drink municipal water, given what we know, without having it be filtered. Meaning, what about all the pharmaceutical drugs that are in the runoff? As one example. And then, of course, the pesticides and herbicides that we've just been talking about that are tainting the water supply. I mean, there's all these reasons why you would never. And then the municipal water system trying to purify it with chlorine and fluoride and all these other chemicals. So, why would you ever drink water, that has that kind of tainting?
It's a real challenge. I mean, there's unfortunately privilege in not being able to choose to not drink municipal water, but some people don't necessarily have that privilege, which is why this needs to be a universal standard that we have to clean up our water issues. Everybody should deserve clean water out of their tap. Everybody should deserve clean water for a healthy lifestyle, but it's not our reality. We don't have, look at Flint, Michigan. They still haven't fixed their water issue. This has to be a priority of our political system, and unfortunately it's not. It's another reason why those of us that have the privilege to buy organic agriculture and to be educating others about why we need to be eating clean, it's not just because of the fact that we want to support farmers that are using the right practices, or we don't want more chemicals in our body. The fact is, you just don't want more chemicals in your body because it's in our environment, it's in our water, it's in our beauty products, it's in everything. So by at least eating organic, you're creating the internal environment for our bodies to detoxify some of those. If you're not eating a clean diet, you're adding more challenge into the body. No matter what, you're getting some of these chemicals through the environment, but by choosing a clean organic diet with regenerative, hopefully, practices behind those organic products, you're at least giving your body an opportunity to detox and regenerate when it has the opportunity.
When you talk about the responsibility of, let's say, the government to give us clean water, it's rather a catch-22, because we ask ourselves, where does the health of an individual prioritize in the system of what gets money and what doesn't? Because it is all about money in the end, right? if money is put towards purifying the water system, it would happen. I mean, we can send people to the moon, we can fight wars in Afghanistan and elsewhere, but why is it that something as important as our basic water supply is left down at the lower level of priorities?
Well, so you're hitting on one of the main political topics of our time, the misallocation of resources. And unfortunately, the pharmaceutical industry and the military industrial complex and the fossil fuel industry has an incredible grip on our political process and our political system here in the States. And until we buck that system and stand up for our rights as individuals, we're going to continue to see corporate control of our political system. And I think that we have to stand up and elect officials that are not beholden to corporations and reinvigorate our domestic systems, our water systems, our agriculture systems, our infrastructure. We definitely need to be thinking about how we take care of ourselves domestically instead of spending these tremendous amounts of money on war and fossil fuels and pharmaceuticals that don't serve us.
Well, one thing that COVID-19 has done is made everyone more aware of taking responsibility for their well-being. So how has this virus helped or hurt your perception of where we're going as a society?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that, one of the silver linings of this this virus challenge is people are thinking more about their health and wellness. We're seeing tremendous amounts of demand for botanical-based products, immune-building vitamins and botanicals, and that's a huge plus. I mean, if people are looking at nutrition again, how we can support our immune systems through nutrition and botanicals, that's a huge plus. It is going to continue to be a challenge from here on out. I don't think that this is going to end and then we're going to be back to life as normal. We're going to be in a continual challenge. We have almost now 8 billion people on the planet. If it's not COVID, it's going to be something else. We have to take this idea of health and wellness into our own hands, be in nature, you have to look at how we support our building blocks of life. And it's nutrition, exercise and movement, and a spiritual practice or spiritual belief of some type. So people have to get back in tune with those three things, prioritize them, and support people that are helping spread the word.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. And I know before we run out of time, I want to spend some time on your most beautiful company and your vision. So if you could take a moment, and I think we're going to flash over the screen here some of the product line and the website link that I provided to the studio. So hopefully they will showcase that. But in the meantime, why don't you just go ahead and launch into a discussion of the vision of mana. And first of all, why don't you tell us, because I know what the word mana means. I lived in Hawaii off and on for 25 years. Yeah. However, not everyone understands what mana is and how important the word and the concept is to what you are doing as a company. So just take a moment and tell us what mana means.
Yeah, so our company is Mana Artisan Botanics, and mana in Hawaiian is the life force energy that runs between all things. So think of it as the equivalent of chi or prana. And so for us, the idea of creating Mana Botanics was to really create an educational opportunity about how we think about our bodies, how we think about what we put into our bodies, and how do we strengthen this idea of nutrition and a spiritual belief. And so for us, when we created our CBD hemp line, it was really about how do we take the best ingredients of Hawaii, the mana of Hawaii, put it into a bottle and offer it to people as a whole plant medicine, and is really a nutritional. So we know just about all the farmers that grow the ingredients that go into our products. We're one of the only companies using an organic macadamia nut oil to infuse our CBD full spectrum extracts in. We're putting the additional botanicals in like turmeric, passion vine, comfrey, plantain. and really looking at how do we synergize those botanical mechanisms in our body to increase the absorption, the efficacy, and the benefits. And so it's a real pleasure getting to be here in Hawaii, to promote Hawaii as a place, but as a feeling, and as a model for connection, diversity, and health and wellness.
Well, when we last spoke, Steve, which I think was about a year and a half ago when we met, I should say, in Hawaii, the legislature was stalled in terms of the farmers' ability to grow more than 10 acres. What has happened in Hawaii where, by the way, Hawaii is a huge opportunity because you have 3 growing seasons for, you well know that as a farmer. So what has happened to help or hurt you in terms of legislative activity in the state of Hawaii?
Yeah, it's unfortunately politics moves very slow here in Hawaii and in general. Our legislature took a recess due to COVID, so we haven't seen the results of what our legislative session is going to produce for hemp. There are some pared down bills that we hope to see passed. I don't know if they're going to make it through the legislature, but we hope to see something that allows for a more commercialized idea of hemp, but that still keeps it in the realm of regenerative agriculture and supports people here in Hawaii doing hemp at a commercial level, and then supports the farmers to actually create products from those crops, and not just extract it and export it. That we actually see the legislature take the initiative to support a thriving vertically integrated industry here. I really hope that that's what our legislature does. I'm not sure that we'll see it this year.
It's just so frustrating to see this because sugar, was the industry of Hawaii for so many years. And then, the sugar industry went through its demise, and there needs to be a replacement for the agriculture of Hawaii to be continuing to survive.
Yeah,
and,
I want to be careful in promoting another monoculture crop because really sugar was so destructive to Hawaii. So really the solution is small scale diversified agriculture or medium scale diversified agriculture. Hemp is absolutely one of those crops that could be part of that system that could make an incredible difference for Hawaii. And I really hope that that our political leaders step up to the opportunity that COVID has provided us to look at how do we look at domestic solutions? How do we look at local solutions to our economy? Because we can't rely on tourism anymore. I don't know that it will come back to that level. We have to look at agriculture as one of the solutions to our economy here in Hawaii, and it should be a diversified approach.
Well, you are such a good spokesperson, Steve. I don't want us to run out of time without you offering the most generous gift to our viewers, which hopefully, I didn't see that website come up, but hopefully they'll edit that into our discussion today so people will have an idea of your website. But go ahead and give us the vital information for the link and your contact info for ordering, the coupon code, and then tell us what you want us to do if we want to order from you folks to at least try. The first step would be to try the CBD. There's so many other products that you offer, and people will be tempted. I know I was blown away by your packaging and your aesthetics. So go ahead and just take a minute, and then we've got to move quickly because I don't want us to run out of time.
Okay, so you can find us at monabotanics.com. Mana Botanics is going to be offering a 20% discount to any of your listeners and viewers. So you can use the code Ageless20 for a 20% discount. I would highly recommend our flagship product, which is our Hawaiian macadamia nut oil with turmeric and organic vanilla. It's called the Hawaiian hemp oil. It comes in 3 different strengths. And our balm is our second best-selling product. But any of our products on the Mana Botanics website are going to have full spectrum extracts in them. So anything that you choose on that website will be a medicinal product.
Excellent. And then if somebody wants to email you, how would they do that?
Yeah, so you can email us at info@monabotanics. You can also email me directly if you really wanted some deeper information. I'm steve@monabotanics.com.
And just Steve, Steve.
You got it. Yep.
At and Botanics. Why don't you spell that just for everybody's
Sure,
sake?
Botanics.
Yeah, it's one N, not two.
That's right. That's right.
Okay. All right. Well, Steve, you've been wonderful, and you've provided such a good foundation for us to understand so many issues. One, of course, the regenerative agriculture issue, to the distinction between hemp and cannabis, and three, of course, Mana's product line, so that we know why we want to order, other than the 20% generous offer. But obviously, with all the choices for CBD today, this is one that I think people need to look at because of what you described. The carrier oils are organic, there's no chemicals, all the reasons that we've discussed. So thank you very much for our mahalo nui loa in Hawaiian. Thank you very much for being with us today, and we wish you well, and a hui ho, as they say.
Hui ho. Big aloha.
Okay, thank you, Steve.
Bye now.
Okay, I wanted to just close quickly with a few comments. I have personally used Steve's products at Mana, from Mana, and I can tell you that they work, and that's always just one person's opinion, but I try to be very objective. I do not ever try to promote something that I wouldn't personally be advocating by my own personal use. So let me just say that if you have an interest in trying CBD, this is one product line, and he has many, many others. Some branch into more of the cosmeceuticals. So take a look at the website, and I think you'll be very pleased that you've discovered this little Hawaiian company. It's a grassroots company, but it's vertically integrated, which is another big plus. So thank you so much for joining us today. We always are so happy when we have guests like Steve Sakala, who teach us so much about how to preserve, not only, well, how to create our well-being, but more importantly, how to preserve it. So this is Michelle Hughes signing off for Ageless and Timeless. Have a beautiful day.
My love for you is immeasurable. My respect for you immense. You're ageless, timeless, lace and fineness, your beauty